Please welcome Rebecca Ruiz, Senior Features Writer at Mashable, in conversation with Amber Heard, actress, activist, and human rights champion of the United Nations Human Rights Office.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am so thrilled to be joined by Amber Heard, actress and activist.
Hello.
Yes.
I'm happy to be here.
And first, I want to talk a little bit about something you all may not know, which is that Amber has a very long track record of being an activist and advocate. I was wondering about that. Thank you.
Could we get mic check? Let's see. I know a thing or two about mics.
He's coming. Thank you.
Here, let's sit closer and you can.
we do this together?
Yeah.
Okay. So anyway, Amber has a very long track record, which I'd love for her to tell us a little bit about. She started very young as an advocate and activist, and maybe just walk us back there.
You're like, yeah. So I started, I guess I started volunteering when I was like 12 or something. And it seems very, how lofty, but I was probably required to do so for school or something. But this weird thing happened. I started really loving it, and not loving it for a reason, especially as a 12-year-old, that my 12-year-old brain could describe. I loved it because it gave me back something. I started volunteering at a soup kitchen before school because I didn't have time to do it any other time other than summers. So every morning before school, started going there, and I think that's when I got addicted to the give back, and I learned a lot. I learned a lot about people, and really not what separates us, but really how similar we are. And I moved to LA when I was young. I had no money, as all starving actors are when they first move to LA, especially. So I looked for ways in which I could be involved, and looked also at the resources I had, and having nothing but time, I wound up finding a way I could work for children's hospitals, or work with children in children's hospitals. And I guess I still do today. I guess working in those hospitals for me has really taught me the main component of service, which is humanity. Humans are the core component of service, and I think that has translated also into my activism. Now I have the opportunity to go on missions, as well as raise attention, funds, support, advocate for various causes and nonprofits. I have the ability to sometimes participate on these missions. So many years ago, I accompanied Amnesty International on their research missions and humanitarian missions on the border, both on the north and south side of the border, to translate for, and to interview, and to advocate for, and to help the refugees and migrants fleeing their home countries in seek of in seek of refuge, and the sheer minor hope that they could make a better life for themselves. And then and I did that for a long time, and I loved that work. I spoke to people throughout the wide range of their process, the arduous and dangerous process of seeking asylum. From deportation camps to depot centers on both sides of the borders, jails, and I sat through sentencing hearings, interviewed, victims of a wide range of violence, specifically women And hearing their stories and collecting that kind of information, imbibing that information was, it's still, informs a huge part of who I am now. And then last April, I just returned from Zaatari in Jordan, which hosts the largest Syrian refugee camp. It's home to tens and thousands of people, well over half of whom are children. And it is there that I, got to see firsthand, a different side of the work, which is, is somewhere in between. The two places, in between the eyes of the people, the individuals with whom I've had the honor, privilege, luck, fortune to be able to serve and advocate on behalf of. I went on a medical mission. This one I'm speaking of right now was a medical mission, which delivered with the Syrian American Medical Society, and they deliver life-saving aid to people in this particular camp and others. And it's there I got to see firsthand really what this kind of work really does mean to me. It's not in the eyes of the little girl who it looks at you and is full of hope and joy and optimism and resilience, and is looking forward to a future and fighting day in and day out to live another day in one of the world's most disheartening and disparaging places. But also in the eyes of the countless individuals who have forfeited the comforts of their own beds on the other side of the world, paid for flights and left the comforts of this world to find themselves sweating endless days, shoulder to shoulder, next to other doctors, performing impromptu surgeries in makeshift hospital hallways in which they are cramped among a million other volunteers and refugees seeking life-saving medical care at whatever chance they may have in getting it, and to see them forfeit yet another night's sleep for yet one more surgery for yet another person just because they can physically more or less do it. And to see them do that countless day in and day out, see the eyes in their face, look in their eyes and see what it gets for them, makes me understand why we as humans can't help but forget how interconnected we all are. And it's not about what nonprofit you're working for, what your cause is. It's the constant reminder that all of us here in this room, or else you would not be sitting here, care about inherently. It's the thing that I'm reminded of every day when you do this kind of work. It's that we're all human. I'm fighting for me. I'm fighting for, in essence, what makes me human. And that's why when I started developing a relationship with the United Nations Human Rights, I found, I could not have found an institution more aligned with my core principles or values, an institution that was founded on and serves to represent and protect the articles as set forth in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which I gotta say, it's 70th year today. I mean, so this is its 70th birthday, not today, but this year. And 70 years later, it's just as salient and profound as it was then. It is now.
Wow. We actually have video from one of your humanitarian trips to that refugee camp. Do we want to play that, please?
So I just finished, it was my first day here at Zaatari. We went to Sam's medical center. Couldn't believe how many people there were
need of real medical attention, and yet everybody greeted me with a smile, and I feel really honored that I could get to know Sam's. I got to actually see the work they're doing. I got to see how much more is needed. I think that's the biggest impact for me is seeing the fight, the spirit, the fortitude and the resilience in the people. You know, and the little girl who hugged me and sat in my lap, who has, you know, a terrible infection for psoriasis, but she was smiling and laughing and giggling with me, and I mean, how can that means the world to me, to see it firsthand, see where it goes.
Thank you so much.
So you mentioned your work with the United Nations just now, and I wanted to ask you, when we spoke on the phone about a month ago for a story I was writing, you spoke about the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and to be honest with you all here, I don't think I've ever heard anyone more excited about the Universal Declaration of Human Rights than Amber was, and it was contagious, actually, to be honest with you. So can you tell me a little bit about, you know, your connection with that document, and when you go out on humanitarian trips like that and missions like that, you know, why that document is so important to you and what it means to you in the field?
Well, I mean, yeah, I kind of get nerd out on some things sometimes. but you know, when I love something, I love it. Or when I relate to something, I really commit, and I become very passionate about things. And in fairness is always that's always mattered to me. You know, I feel like I always say I have this allergy to it. You know, when I was a little kid, I wanted to be, you know, popular or something, or liked in school like everyone else. And I remember some kids were picking on someone who was, you know, had some physical challenges that the rest of the kids didn't have in school, and they used to make fun of him a lot and had no friends. And I remember how many I would come home having. So I've gotten in so many fights in defense of my friend because I was just it grieved me so much, because I think at the end of the day, some part of me knew, without being able to articulate it in this way, that, you know, fairness is fairness for a reason. If it's okay for people to behave in this way to him, then it would also be for me. And I think, you know, part of why I feel so aligned now as a champion of the United Nations human rights, sorry, it's hard to say. Part of why I feel in alignment with them is because the basic pledge involves saying if anyone's human rights are denied, everyone's human rights are denied. And this has been echoed in so many ways by so many leaders and thinkers. And so, you know, for me, I remember, you know, coming home from school and, you know, getting in trouble for yet again another fight. And I remember I was like, you know, I think I said hi or something to the boy I've been defending in school for, you know, sacrificing my one shot at popularity. It never happened anyway, by the way. And he didn't really even know who I was. And I remember being like, what? This is... and being so upset. I remember, you know, talking to my mom later on that night saying how important it was for me still. And because it just felt wrong. But to see it codified, I mean, that was amazing to me. And I guess that's why I feel passionate about it. Eleanor Roosevelt's always been a hero of mine. I mean, she's... you know, I've always been a big fan of her. She's always been a hero of mine, and I remember learning about her in school. And I mean, this woman just, you know, rose to such tremendous personal and professional heights as a woman in her time, and did so with the views that, with a very firm belief and views in respect for racial, gender, economic equality. I felt, you know, knowing that about her and having this deep respect for her long-standing advocacy and support on behalf of women's rights. That piece of history, combined with the fact that I had that respect for her, really cemented in me what I think, was said best by Secretary Clinton at the UN when she said, women's rights are human rights. And then I later find out Eleanor is responsible. She was the first chair. She was the first chair for the UN Commission on Human Rights. And then to learn that she was greatly responsible for the creation of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which was adopted 70 years ago, was pretty profound. I mean, to see it codified. And the things that I had always felt drove and informed my advocacy through my years. Whether it was on a play yard in school or in a soup kitchen or in a refugee camp. Those principles are articulated, protected, and really distilled in that declaration. Think about it. It was a declaration laid out 70 years ago. Despite how much the world has changed in an unprecedented way, how it has changed not just for us in this part of the world, it's changed at an accelerated pace, unprecedented before in known history. But to add the additional factor of it being universal, is to codify a set of principles that are meant to be representative of some of the most ubiquitous and lasting universal rights that we inherently all know we deserve, that are inherent to us. There's a reason why the first articles, 1 and 2, which lays out all human beings are free and equal, and that we all, no matter your gender, your race, your creed, your color, your political opinion, lack thereof, we all deserve to be free and equal. There's a reason it resonates with all of us, and all of us feel as though we deserve it. And that document, as it lays out in so many articles, is still applicable and upholds today. I can't think of really anything that does. Constitutions need to be amended, creeds need to be updated, religious principles need to be adapted and changed, or sometimes aren't, but are. And to also exacerbate that metric with how much of the world, the different cultures to which it's applicable or should apply. It's an incredible feat to think that this declaration could very much embody the essence of what it means to be a responsible, ethical, moral human being that's also motivated to protect that in others, because to protect it in others is to protect it in you.
See what I mean? It's just... we've been talking about big values and principles, right? And these big ideas. What about action? What is your call to action for this moment in time, which is a very turbulent one?
This is the coolest thing to me, because you're asking me this question now in 2018. What month is it again? You're asking me this question now in 2018, which would be such a fundamentally different question a second ago, not 1 second, but a year ago, 10 years ago. I can't even imagine 70 years ago, before, when this was initially adopted. You're asking me a question about action now. And the cool part of that is you have never been more powerful. We have never been more powerful than we are right now. It's never been a better time to be alive. Yes, there are so many injustices in the world. There are so many things wrong. So far we have to come. But we are not only enjoying the fruits of so many years of intense work done by thinkers, our ancestors in humanity to get us to a point we are now at with unprecedented ability to do so from our hand, literally in your hand. I'm just pointing at the one phone I see, but in your hand is the power to change the world, and it's not hyperbole. It's evidence in the fact that look at how different the world was 2.5 years ago. There was no movement in the streets to address women's issues specifically. There was no one saying her story. What about her? There was no Me Too. There was no presence of that. There was no energy. It was a fundamentally different 2.5 years ago than it is today. Why? Not because activists, not because celebrities or activists or politicians or people in power stood up and made the change, or not because the points were salient and resonated. No, it's because now we have finally reached the pinnacle, the pinnacle of the collision between our awareness of our place in the world with technology and our unprecedented ability to be increasingly connected to an increasingly growing global community. We now have met that with our ability to do something with it. We are now burdened, but also driven by unprecedented levels of access to information, involvement, community, and power. The power you can see in the streets, you can see in the way that yesterday I was in discussion amongst people that don't work in my field, and I remember asking very politely, a woman and a man were speaking, and they were talking about wages. And she was mentioning, you know, she overheard how much her male colleague is making and was hired with, even though she was far more qualified and had been there longer. And she said, I went home and I felt so bad. And I asked her politely, well, can I ask you what you did? Because I understand that. I am a white woman. I make in the United States. So I can at best make 80 cents to my male counterpart's dollar. And that's not the case in my industry. It's far, far worse in my industry. But let's say, just working in the United States. I know going home, I would have gone home and said, okay, well, you know, I'd rather have the 80 cents and have my job than to lose altogether, not be able to feed and support my family, and have the next person take it for 80, 75 even, who knows. I know it's harder to do the other thing, which is to have asked your boss, to have demanded more, to have stood up and said, may I ask what the starting salary for this gentleman was, since we have the same qualifications, for example. So I was just curious, because 2.5 years ago, I wouldn't have thought of it. I have been complaining with this big mouth I've been burdened with, sorry. I've been complaining and talking about this and trying to engage this discussion since I arrived in Hollywood 16 years ago. But in the last 3 years, seeing the energy, the support, the galvanization, the grassroots support that's come up to change the communal cultural conversation and attitude made it possible for me to not even imagine not asking her, what did you do? And she, much to my relief, said, I went to my boss, I demanded more. And I said, and it worked? And she said, oh yeah, it did, but it was not the point. The point was, the harder thing to do was definitely that, I'm sure, is to risk, especially if you are a woman, and I tend to I'm focused on women's rights and women's issues, but I think that's because there are also men's rights and men's issues as well. But I have noticed myself the power that we all have. Mara up here speaking a few minutes ago, perfect example. It's no longer the job of activists or solely for activists, because I'd still like to be a part of the conversation. It's no longer the job for politicians or or outdated institutions. It's our job to make the world we want to live in. And it's not only our job, we actually can. It's evidenced every single day. We see the Me Too and the Time's Up and the Black Lives Matter, and you name it. All of these groups were started not by, people like me taking a stand, rising up, although I hope I added to some support in that. I hope I lend my platform, which I feel very blessed and honored to have. I hope it supported, but my voice was able to be lent, but to help someone who might not have found their own voice. But really, the change was made by people in this room. Everyone now owns the power, and I think that's the coolest that's the coolest answer I could give you, because you're asking me this now, and it's changed as evidence as what happened in just 2 or 3 years in my life, how differently some of my issues were handled then versus now is a perfect example. The power is now in all of our hands, and I'm so excited to live in this world because it's much more representative of the world we want to live in. It's ours.
I love ending on that, right? The power is in all of our hands, and we just need to use it. So thank you so much, Amber. Yeah.